Okay, we will go ahead and call to order the November 16th, 2022 Longmont Planning and Zoning Commission. Next item is roll call.
Chairman Poland,
Here.
Commissioner Height,
Present.
Commissioner Tedda,
Here.
Vice Chairman Goldberg, Commissioner Flagg, Commissioner Lukacs, Commissioner Kohler. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next item is communications from Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen.
Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners, I just want to remind you that at the last meeting on October 19th, you appointed your chair, Michael Pullen, and Commissioner Chris Tedda to interview candidates for a recommendation to City Council to fill your vacancies on the board. So we've done that on Monday, and at the items from Commission, they will bring that forward and make a recommendation for your, hopefully, approval and to move on to council. So that is all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I will go ahead then, and I will open up the public comment to be heard. Everybody has 5 minutes. We have a list of people here. The first person, and when you come up to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record. The first person is John Pillman. And once again, just as a reminder, this is not for the item that we'll be hearing later on. This is for items that are not on the agenda for today.
There we go. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is John Pillman. I'm a resident at 1303 Spruce Avenue. Appreciate your time, by the way. I'm here as a representative on behalf of the Bond Farm neighborhood, and we're trying to understand why and how zoning changes occurred between 2016 and 2018 that essentially rezoned the portion of Bond Farm south of Spruce Avenue from a single family to a multifamily mixed use zoning. This has changed a little bit because I've talked to Jennifer through email and in person now, and I'm going to be working with Jennifer on trying to ascertain kind of the process on how that rezoning took place. I have some questions, or we have some questions as well, that I'll work with Jennifer on. But there's something else here I want to read because I think it's important that you all might want to keep in mind as these zonings and rezonings continue to take place. There, in doing a lot of research, there seem to be like 4 guiding principles that zoning experts or zoning specialists kind of say govern the rezoning process, probably not telling you anything you don't know. But one of those is that zone change is consistent with the applicable comprehensive plan for the area. And we have a comprehensive plan, right? And zoning took place as a result of that comprehensive plan. The thing that we find a little bizarre and concerning is that in the Envision Longmont comprehensive plan, it specifically states that to work with the residents to define and preserve desirable characteristics of neighborhoods. And another thing you'll find in there is that ensure that infill development and redevelopment is designed to be sensitive to and compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. We believe, and there are quite a few of us represented here tonight even, in the Bond Farm neighborhood, that development proposal is not compatible with the character of the neighborhood, okay? And so, and I think this is concerning because I think there's a lot of other things happening within Longmont in established neighborhoods. In our case, a lot of the homes are 100 years old. So there's some questions that we have as a result of that. I won't go through right now. But there's a second principle, and that is there a demonstrated need for a zoning change? And so we're trying to understand why did this zoning change occur in the Bond Farm neighborhood around 2016, 2018? What was the driving force and the driving need for that? Okay, and Jennifer and I think we'll go through that and try to ascertain that. The zoning change be consistent with the character of the surrounding community and current uses. So in our case, right, the developer proposes 70 townhomes on roughly 6 acres, 0.85 acres is a park, so it's 6 acres minus 0.85. It comes out to a density of about 13.5 units per acre. We're going to ascertain what the current density is in that area, but there's a lot of us that feel like the current density is way below that. And the other concern is that it's a 3-story development, and the homes in that area directly surrounding it are single-family, one-story units. There are a couple of two-stories. There's no three-story units in Bond Farm that we're aware of. And then the last one I'll bring up, and then I'll stop, is that the zoning change is consistent with the order to the development of public services. So again, we have a concern because the streets were built, in many cases, many decades ago. There's already traffic issues on the feeder streets to Spruce. You may have heard this from other discussions. There's Sherman, there's Grant, there's Francis. You know, they're all very narrow streets. And right now, the way this development's currently proposed, the only way that anybody can exit this development is onto Spruce Avenue. And then once they're on Spruce Avenue, it's kind of game on. So we have concerns about that as well. So again, I'll work with Jennifer, but I think it's important that you guys know that what our concerns are, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pullman. Next person on the list is Jerry Walther.
Good evening, and thank you for listening to me. My name is Jerry Walther, and I live at 1305 Spruce Avenue, just down the street from the proposed Bond Farm development. Our group, the Bond Farm Neighbors, has been meeting regularly since late August, when we all received the notification from the city of an online meeting about the proposed development of the Bond Farm property. Since then, we have developed, created, and distributed almost 200 flyers, some of which I bring to you tonight. On behalf of our group, there are several of us who have made a concerted effort to contact all our neighbors from Sunset to Bowen and from 3rd to 1st Avenues by knocking on doors, speaking to them, and leaving our flyers. I personally have spoken with over 50 residents of Bond Farm, and they almost unanimously feel the development proposed is too large and is incompatible with our neighborhood. People are concerned that inserting a development of this size onto the Bond Farm property will seriously degrade the quality of life in our neighborhood for all its present and future residents. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Next person is Michelle Bennett.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Bennett, and I live at 203 Francis Street, catty corner from the Bond Farm. And if you've never been there or down Spruce Street, I would really like to invite all of you to come on down, drive through Spruce Street, so you kind of get the feel of what we're talking about. Because it isn't just as black and white as it seems. It's a very special neighborhood. So this evening is more rhetorical for me. I have questions. I've lived there for 26 years. I pretty much thought I had my, fingers on the pulse of what was going on in my neighborhood. And then this, the idea of it being rezoned, and I thought I knew what was happening, and then all of a sudden this happened, and how did we get here? So I have some questions, and I'm just gonna throw them out there. I know y'all can't answer me. But, so these were my questions. So now, can anyone buy up houses in the designated orange zone, tear them down, and then build 3-story apartment buildings? So if it's now an orange zone and there's single-family homes, if I bought 2 of them, I could tear them down and build to the zoning code. I am curious about that. What is the difference between, I don't know, but the RMN and RMF, and why are certain areas with existing single-family homes under these zoning parameters? I don't quite understand that. So shouldn't all existing single-family homes be in an RSF zone? Because they're already single-family zones. should there be some zoning criteria exceptions in historical districts? Because historical districts are a little bit different than some outlying areas. They kind of have a life of their own. Let's see. So I could see that being on a case-by-case basis if the developer fit into that environment. Number 5, did the city planning and zoning staff and decision makers ever consider that some developer would come and buy the Bond Farm and build 70 units? And 70 units is going to be squished into this little place. I mean, squished. So that is what I'm like, did anybody expect that to ever happen when they rezoned this area? And when zoning criteria is defined, does the scope consider the age of the existing infrastructure and its future use? So if you're going to zone something, do you look at the infrastructure around it, what the future of that infrastructure needs to be in order to rezone it to that capacity? Is the city willing to update all infrastructures to support the future needs of an RMN zone if a developer wants to tear down and rebuild? You know, what can we expect from the city since it was the zoning department that chose to do this? So what can we expect as the neighborhood from the city to help us out and help us benefit from this development? How does zoning the Bomb Farm and homes south of Spruce Avenue as an RMN zone benefit the existing single-family homeowners? It doesn't. It just doesn't. And there's nothing that the city can do to make it any better. It's an old historical area. We can't widen the streets. We can't add this. We can't subtract that. So my last, how many homeowners in the RMN are aware of this information? Do all our citizens know that they're in this? I mean, that's why I did the map. Do all these people know this? Do they all know somebody could come and do this in their backyard? Because if not, I'd like to suggest that you tell them. They might have something to say about it as well. These are your citizens, our citizens, and this is our town. So they might have a voice about it also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Next person on the list is Mark Danielson.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners, staff. My name is Mark Danielson. I live with my wife Annie at the corner of Lincoln and Spruce, just 1 block east of the proposed Bond Farm development.
Can you please give us the address for the
251
records?
Lincoln Street.
Thank you.
Yep, sorry about that. I would like to make a plea this evening that you curtail the scope and density of that project to help it better align with Longmont's growth plans expressed in Envision Longmont. Thank you for a few minutes of your time. You will soon be called upon to formally consider the Bond Farm development project at 1313 Spruce. When that happens, you will be required to evaluate a very complex issue, as development proposals so often are. How do you honor the rights of the developer who has invested in this property with the hope of making a profit from it? He can quote chapter and verse from the municipal code that says under the current RMN zoning, he can erect 6 to 18 units per acre, and it's true. How then do you honor the rights of the surrounding community who have invested dearly in their homes and have a right not to have those property values and their cherished lifestyles diminished by the action of others? They can quote chapter and verse from Envision Longmont, our comprehensive development plan that requires planning and zoning to, quote, maintain and enhance the character of established neighborhoods, unquote. Also true. The municipal code is in tension with the city's vision. It's complex. If it weren't, we wouldn't need human beings sitting where you are. Human beings have the unique ability to access wisdom to solve complex tensions, and that is what's needed here. There's no formula, no algorithm, no set of rules that can take the place of human wisdom. My appeal this evening is that as you weigh these opposing desires and rights, that you listen carefully to the wisdom of crowds. You may remember the bestseller by New York Times business author James Surowiecki by that name, in which he argued that in complex situations, there is surprising wisdom in the consensus of the crowd. The crowd in this case, as you've heard and will hear repeatedly in weeks and months to come, finds this current proposal simply crazy. Now, you may be tempted to discount these voices as just the NIMBY rants of cranky neighbors, of course. No one likes change, they're just gonna have to get over it. And maybe that's the case. Or maybe this is the wisdom of crowds. Consider this. If you were here for the previous developer's proposal of a 40-unit mixed-use community, you may remember that it cruised through virtually without public opposition. Now, did anyone in the neighborhood love that proposal? Absolutely not. Anyone you asked had wished the property would remain vacant so we could walk our dogs there and preserve our views of the Flatirons, but we all knew that wasn't realistic. Change happens, and we have to adjust. That's life. So when he proposed a development of 40 units, neighbors, almost without exception, shrugged. Things change, that's life. Fast forward to today, when this developer proposes jamming 70 units onto the same property, now the neighborhood is united in active vocal opposition. This isn't change that we have to adjust to. This is crazy. Everyone consents that the surrounding streets, engineered decades or 100 years ago, were not designed to carry that load. Everyone consents that the surrounding historic neighborhood of single and two-family homes is clearly the wrong location for condos towering 3 stories high with rooftop decks. That's not change, that's crazy. Everyone consents it. I appeal to you to hear the wisdom of the crowd, the wisdom of the neighborhood. We're braced for change, and we'll accept it with a shrug. But we're not resigned to accepting crazy, and this is crazy. I appeal to you to honor your charge from Envision Longmont to maintain and enhance the character of the Bond Farm neighborhood by cutting this proposed development in half. Cut the project to 35 or 40 units, proving again the wisdom of crowds. I think you'll watch the opposition melt away. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Danielson. Next person on the list, and I hope I get the name right, John Laron.
Hello, my name is John Lochran,
Lochran.
and I live at 220 Sherman. And I brought a little graphic this evening to share with you, and I don't, people from in the back won't be able to see it, but some of them may have seen it. And I don't know if you can see it, but I live over here on Sherman. The previous development proposal that people had talked about, the entrances were kind of offset. So as you look at Grant right down here, there's a little jog so that people have to make a couple of turns going in and out of here. On Sherman, as currently proposed under the new development, it's a straight shot, right? So that really, my idea is that most of this traffic on this north side, so people coming from Hover are gonna come down here, down the Sherman, one turn and they're in, right? Same with people coming from I-25 or from north on Main, right? They're gonna come down Third, just like water under the door, right? The least resistance, just go down Sherman, it's one turn, right? They're not really gonna come down and make a turn here and then make a double turn. Same with coming out. People coming down Francis, which is pretty problematic right now because it's backed up. But people there will most likely just come straight down Sherman, they got one more turn, right? And same with coming out. So we're gonna have the traffic from Hover on the north side, from Francis, from Longmont High School, from 66, where I typically would go to work, I would come right down there. Also from 25, all feeding mostly on the Sherman. So I don't believe that's a safe thing, because my house has a horse hitching post out front, and a number of the houses on my street do. It's over 120 years old. So I'm not sure that that street can physically accommodate that, or what other reparations could be made to make that work. But also, it's just not equitable. So the thing that I like about the previous arrangements where the streets were offset is that when someone comes out, they're gonna make 2 turns. They're gonna make a couple of turns. So they could go right and then go up Francis, or maybe they could go up Judson. Once they make that turn, they could go any other way. But at this point, I believe that most of the people are gonna follow the route of least resistance and go down Sherman. So, another, issue with that I marked on here, some of the slopes. So on the, guidelines from the city, I believe it's 4 or 5% that a new intersection should not be more than 4 or 5% grade, right? So my contention would be, there was a traffic study the other day, I don't know if they looked at the grade, but it looks to me like the bottom of Sherman Street is already over 5%, maybe 10%. So how would that tie in, if the developer's gonna tie that in, would that not be a new intersection? We know that this is pre-existing, so we're not really proposing to change that, but how would that development come up? Would he build a big ramp up from the bottom so that he could get that grade up? Or if that intersection was offset, would that be a different intersection? So I'm not sure how that would be accommodated, but the final thing, and that would be true with all of these streets, have that same grade and the same grade coming up. I was asking my neighbors, just as we came in, about the kid who got killed on a skateboard coming down Grant a couple of years ago. Same situation going in there. So we're gonna increase this traffic right now. Today, as I was coming home, and I crossed this street on Third, it's not easy, but there was a gentleman trying to turn on his bike right there. It's not an easy turn. People don't ride their bikes down Francis, if you ever notice, or down Third, I'm sorry, if you notice, because it's not safe. A lot of people ride and walk on Spruce. And you can tie into the bike path down here, and you can also ride downtown and jump on Pratt or Bowen and go up one of those streets and get on the back streets. The only other through street is like Long's Peak, right? So I'm wondering, like, if the goal for Longmont is to be a bikeable, walkable, user-friendly city, how are we, what are we doing with one of the main bike thoroughfares? So it seems like we're doing something to spite ourselves. So thank you for your attention, and I appreciate you considering our concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Lochran. Next on the list is Daniel Sorrells. Did I get that right? I don't have any comment. No comment? Okay. Next person is Drew Sorrells.
No comment. We thought we were signing in.
Okay. No problem. Next person, Doug Jones.
Good evening, Doug Jones at 243 Sherman Street, so just up the hill on John's map over there. I just wanted to echo the rest of the neighbors at the Bond Farm that I'm wondering if a 70-unit development is the right place for such a large development. When Peter Spalding brought the co-housing project in at 40 units, we weren't excited about it, but we thought, this is a good size, it's a good fit for the neighborhood. We weren't real excited about the extra businesses along Spruce Street, but we were willing to live with that because the density of the place felt like it was compatible with what was going on there. The size of the houses, the size of the development felt comfortable enough to, as Mark very eloquently stated, it made sense for us, and we were agreed to what that could bring to us. With this development being so large, so tall, and just kind of this cookie cutter townhouses just slapped down in the middle of this great historic neighborhood. We think it's the wrong choice and it's not the right place for it. So I hope you guys consider that, you know, let's work together to make it something and work with the developer to make it something that we can all live with and that we're all happy with. So, you know, the developer's needs are met, the neighborhood's needs are met, and we come out with a win-win. I think that's what we're all going for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The next person is Annie Saroniak.
Thank you for bravely trying to pronounce my last name. It is Annie Sorotniak. I live with my husband, Brian Whitehead, at 227 Grant Street. And I, as well, will just want to first thank you all for your time and for your service to our community in this complicated issue. I support private property rights and sensible development, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. As a resident of this neighborhood, I make observations all the time about the traffic as I run, I walk, I ride my road bike, and I commute, mostly on Spruce. So I'm paying attention a lot. And so these are some of my own observations rather than I haven't sat and counted numbers of cars, but I'm aware and I pay attention. So my point is, while the guidelines for the density approved for the zoning change may allow the 70 units on, I guess it comes out to be 3.85 units per acre, it's my opinion that the proposed plan by 1313 Spruce is not compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The density that 75 units, if we assume 2 drivers, 2 trips per day minimum, the effect of those vehicles on feeder streets that are narrow, I feel it will not be safe for the children and the seniors in our neighborhood. Also, the egress heading west on Spruce to Sunset would create an extreme bottleneck. And I take that road very often, and it often is very, very tight. So add all that volume, and I believe it will be really challenging. And then the question, who would pick up the externalized cost of the effect of the heavy construction over the years needed to build such a large project on, it would definitely affect Spruce Street, and who's going to pick up that cost? That's kind of a question. And so I ask that, I feel that the development does not maintain and enhance the character of the neighborhood. I request that you please curtail the scope and size of the project. And I was in support of the co-housing development. I had lived in co-housing at Lyons Valley Village for 8 years before I moved to Lyons in 2014. And my husband has been living at Grant Street for 27 years. So we're long-term-ish. I'm long-term-ish, but he's very long-term resident. So I do support development. I don't assume it's going to be just an empty space. But I think maybe we together could work to find something that is a middle ground that will be profitable for the developers, but also safe and sustainable and with integrity and maintaining the quality and the character of our neighborhoods. So I love Longmont and I love my Longmont neighbors. So again, thank you for the time and for being willing to listen to our input. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rotniak. That is the last of the person who was on the list. We do allow anybody else who would like to come up. You do get 5 minutes if there's anybody else who would like to take this time. Seeing nobody getting up, I will go ahead and close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the October 19th, 2022 meeting. Is there any questions, comments? And Vice Chair Goldberg.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I move to approve the October 19 minutes.
We have approval. Commissioner Flagg.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion, comments? If not, Jane, we are ready for a vote.
Commissioner Height?
Has to abstain.
Commissioner Tetta?
Abstain. Vice Chairman Goldberg,
Yes.
Chairman Poland,
Yes.
Commissioner Flake,
Yes.
Commissioner Lukacs,
Yes.
Commissioner Kohler.
Yes.
Chairman, that passes 5 approvals and 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much. The next item is item 6A, the Sugar Mill Station Preliminary Plat. Presenting is Senior Planner Jennifer Hewitt Apperson.
Good evening, members of the commission. For your consideration this evening, I would like to present a proposed preliminary plat for Sugar Mill Station. This particular project is located at the northeast corner of East Ken Pratt Boulevard and North 119th Street, opposite the historic sugar factory. This site is within the Sugar Mill Highway 119 Gateway Focus Area, identified as an area of change in the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan. So as an overview of the project, this particular property is just short of 24 acres. It is zone mixed-use employment, and the applicant is proposing approximately 350 units of multifamily housing, plus an additional 3¼ acres of commercial. We are in the preliminary plat stage, so some of these numbers could get fleshed out a little bit more as this project proceeds to the site plan process. Additionally, this is part of the sugar factory planning sub-area that is part of the overall sugar factory steam planning process that has been ongoing within the city of Longmont. So in terms of the area zoning and Envision Longmont comprehensive plan designation, high-density residential, as is proposed here, is permitted as a secondary use in the mixed-use employment district. So the hatched area on this map is all in the mixed-use employment district. There are a number of unincorporated properties still within this area. I've outlined this area in dark blue, and this larger area is designated mixed-use employment in the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan. As a general rule, secondary uses are permitted so long as they are less than 50% of the total area of the zone. The subject property, as outlined in the red, is clearly less than 50% of the total mixed-use employment area. So additionally, the proposed project does meet the minimum density thresholds for the mixed-use employment zone. Specifically, mixed-use zones allow residential that is at a minimum of 18 dwelling units per acre. And this particular project would be upwards of about 25 units per acre, consistent with both Envision Longmont as well as the Land Development Code. So in terms of the preliminary plat, I know this is a little difficult to see. There is a much larger, more zoomable version of the proposed plat within your packet. So again, this particular property is just short of 24 acres. Proposed are 5 lots and 1 outlot, as well as an interior road network that would provide connectivity to Ken Pratt, 119th, as well as Sugar Mill Road. Identified as well are preliminary utility easements, and there are some additional utility easements and drainage easements and such that are going to be necessary. And as this project proceeds through the process, presuming that this commission chooses to advance it, the applicant would continue to work with various utility providers, including Xcel Energy and the City of Longmont's utility providers, utility departments, to ensure that all of the necessary easements and such would be, and rights of way would be included on the final plat and as part of the final site plan. So in terms of the concept plan, the applicant's going to provide quite a bit more detail on what they are proposing in terms of building types, layouts, etc. The concept plan, as provided with the preliminary plat, shows 4 residential lots with 11 multifamily buildings plus a clubhouse. There would be a commercial lot fronting on 119th Street, just north of Ken Pratt Boulevard. That would be a commercial lot to be developed at a second phase of the project. Additionally, there would be an outlot with detention and water quality at the intersection of Ken Pratt and 119th Street, and this would be part of that gateway corridor with the appropriate landscaping pursuant to code. One thing to note as well is that there are not any proposed variances from land development code standards that have been identified with this preliminary plat. We anticipate that the project would comply with all applicable setback, height, et cetera, requirements. So as a conclusion, staff is recommending approval of this project. There were 3 conditions that were essentially items that would need to be done as part of the final plat and site planning process. These are pretty standard. Specifically adding the inclusionary housing comments and ensuring that those requirements are met, and continuing to work with our fire rescue department to ensure that they have the necessary access and easements, et cetera, as well as working with our engineering, natural resources, public works, natural resources team to ensure that appropriate grading, drainage, et cetera, is provided on site. The applicant has demonstrated compliance with review criteria for both the general all application types as well as the specific preliminary plat. As noted, the project as proposed will comply with city standards and is not seeking any variances. It does meet the requirements established for secondary uses. As well, it is consistent with the emerging goals and recommendations of the Sugar Factory Steam Subarea Plan. The applicant has been working with staff to ensure that what they are proposing is consistent with the overall vision for this particular area. And again, as noted, staff does recommend approval of this project with conditions that really just relate to additional information that would be required with subsequent applications. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the applicant to discuss the project concept in more detail. Thank you.
Got it. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to present this project. We're very excited to be here and present a new rental community within the Sugar Mill Station redevelopment area. And by the way, do I need to state my address? Sorry about that. John Finch, Fairfield Residential, 1644 Platt Street, Denver. I'd like to thank staff as well for their direction and the collaboration that we received to this moment tonight. Oh, got it, I think. Oh, went too far. I did just want to talk a little bit about Fairfield and who we are. We have been around for 36 years doing business in the apartment development business. That's what we do. That's what we focus on. We develop what we call a fully integrated platform where we find the opportunity, we take it through the approval process, through permitting, we construct the community, and at the back end, we manage it as well. So we're involved from the front end to the actual management of the property. This is our first community in Longmont, but we do have a long history in the Denver and the surrounding communities over many years. I wanted to just point out some maps that were taken from the August 2020 ULI report. It was the technical advisory panel report. And, excuse me, in that report, they identified land use mixes that to achieve a goal of revitalization of the historic sugar mill area. The panel identified these 3 land use plans, and I just wanted to point out the residential areas of them. To the east is the residential zone in the orange color, and there's also one kind of the mid area of the plan. And our proposal is over on the eastern area in that residential zone. And again, here's another image of the site. As you can see, it's on the eastern end with the sub-area plan and with the dashed line around it. Again, as it relates to consistency, we believe that we are consistent with the zoning. We have the zoning map down in the corner of the image, and then just kind of for historical, the site plan shown on the upper corner of the slide. That's kind of our starting point. We, in working with staff, we kind of came up with this kind of cartooned image. And that's what we work towards. It's changed a bit, as you'll see in the slides going forward. But everything has to start somewhere, and it's kind of cool to take a look at where you started and kind of how it develops over a period of time. From here, I'd like to hand over to Leanne Villiers, who can take you through the more details of the project. And I also wanted to say, if I may, that members of the Fairfield team are here, as well as our full design team. So if I can't answer a question, I've got some backup.
Good evening. I'm going to expand this just a minute. So it's excellent. Okay. Good evening, Leanne Villiers with Norris Design. We're at 1101 Bannock Street in Denver. Thank you very much, Jennifer and commissioners and staff, for your time tonight. We're very excited to discuss this project. And, as Jennifer touched on, the preliminary plat, before you really establishes a gridded network, and this roadway network creates the framework for what will happen for the rest of the community and the rest of the sub-area plan to the east as well as to the west. And it creates utility easements that will really help set the redevelopment of this area in motion. The roadway networks improve the conditions of the existing roadways, provide the access to those adjacent parcels, both to the east and the west, and provide opportunities and infrastructure for additional parcels in the future. So this is our conceptual site plan, which provides the commercial, residential, and recreational land uses. The residential component not only supports the future employment and commercial uses within Sugar Mill area, but also fills a greater need within Longmont. The streets have been designed to accommodate on-street parking, and buildings have been brought closer to the streets to support the desire for a more urban streetscape. This was an important urban design element to help promote the pedestrian connectivity and to hide parking behind the buildings. The multifamily community will include indoor amenities such as fitness, co-working spaces, community rooms, and bike and ski repair shop, while outdoor spaces are anticipated to include pool and spa, outdoor kitchen, fire pit areas, community plazas, and community garden. A 10-foot multi-use bike trail is being provided along the north side of Ken Pratt Boulevard, and this trail will provide a portion of the missing link identified in the Parks and Recreation Trails Master Plan to provide connection to existing trails and recreational amenities. We worked very closely with city staff to locate the required pocket park in a location that would not only serve the residents of this community, but also the greater Sugar Mill area as it continues to develop. This site plan meets all city code, as was mentioned, and we don't anticipate any variances. So the architectural form and materials of the building took direct inspiration from the historic sugar mill. The use of brick and high-quality fiber cement siding highlights the past industrial nature of the site while keeping a pedestrian scale for residential experiences. At the request of city staff, the buildings along Ken Pratt are 4 stories, while the interior buildings drop to 3 stories adjacent to the interior roads to promote that pedestrian urban scale. And all buildings will feature 4-sided architecture. The top left image is a view of a 4-story residential building from Ken Pratt Boulevard. Moving to the top right image is the view of the pedestrian scale of the internal gridded roadways. The bottom left image is a view of the front of the clubhouse and leasing center. And lastly, the bottom right image is a view of the clubhouse and leasing center from Ken Pratt Boulevard at Great Harvest Drive entry. So in closing, this project will be the catalyst for the revitalization of Sugar Mill area by providing the residents and infrastructure to attract future opportunities. We thank you very much for your time this evening. Our team is here and available for comment and questions.
Thank you very much. I think at this time, this is a public hearing item, and we will go ahead to the public invited to be heard on this item. I will open that up. Currently, there is nobody on the list, but we do invite anybody in the audience who would like to come up and speak to this item on the agenda. You will have 5 minutes to go ahead and state any opinions you have on it. And remember, please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Michael Baird. I'm Director of Supply Chain with Western Sugar. My address is 12698 Fisher Drive in Englewood, Colorado, down in Denver. I'm here representing the sugar mill. Yes, it is 100 years old. Yes, we know every bit of those 100 years. We feel it within our operations on a day-to-day basis. But we're still operating. And I just wanted to make sure that that's clear to the zoning personnel, to the planning personnel. There's a railroad that goes north of Sugar Mill Road, and that is still operational. And all intentions are with our long-term planning, this site is crucial to our business feeding into Denver directly as one of the only silos that we have, and silo stations that are in this area that can feed the large customers that we have in the Denver area. You know, Denver geologically is kind of on an island when it comes to supply chain and how that fits into other areas of the United States. So with the name being Western Sugar and feeding a lot of our customers going west and Denver being a big part of that, Longmont is very much a big part of our plan. So we have no problem with growth. We have no problem with development. We just want to make sure that we are here to say it's still operational. We plan on keeping it operational through all of its old age and grace. And that railroad, we do plan on continuing to operate. So the noise, the operation of a sugar mill, loading trucks, the traffic of big trucks, because there's no packaging out of that place, and there will be no. It's all bulk rail, bulk trucks. So I'm here to represent the company and to make sure that that is known, that it's our intention to keep it to 150 to 200 years old. So it goes with the long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. Anybody else in the public? Yes?
Hello, John Lockburn again, 220 Sherman Street. And just looking at the picture right here and the previous one from the inside view of the rental office, my understanding that the city was trying to encourage less grass area, especially that is not going to be a functional area. So I'm just looking at this right here along Ken Pratt. It looks like a lot of green, grassy area that would just be maintained for no particular purpose. So I would just encourage the commission to kind of be a springboard and model for other developments, sort of like at the hospital. I thought they did a nice job at the new hospital, rather than just having like a grass where you see the guys out there every week cutting, bagging, hauling that away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockren. Anybody else in the public would like to come up? If not, I'll go ahead and I'll close the public invited to be heard for item number 6A. At this time, we will open it up to the commission for questions, comments, and motions, if somebody is so moved. Commissioner Flagg, kick us off.
Thank you, Chair. Following up on the sugar mill statement, I have to ask about the buildings. So I guess, Leanne, are you, can you speak to the building construction and how sound-worthy or not they will be?
Good evening. Related to sound, we're typically required to do an acoustical study, and that's done, during the daytime hours. So wherever the noise readings kind of land, we will, design the buildings accordingly. So whether that means, the windows maybe have a higher acoustical grade to them, but ultimately we have to insulate to a certain standard, and that's what we do.
And your tenants will understand that there is a working railroad adjacent and
They will.
and the accompanying lighting that is in existence. What size will those units be?
We're proposing 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and the square footages are roughly 750 square feet on the low side, up to 1,300 square feet on the high end.
So the possibility is that you may actually have small families, people with children who are going to rent these units?
That could be.
And since I don't have a detailed landscaping or grounds plan, I'm wondering if there is provision for some kind of play area or a place where a kid can kick a ball?
We have some areas, some green spaces identified on the plan. They haven't been formally, identified as exactly what the activities could be. But things like that we are definitely considering as we look at what our resident profile looks like.
And some of these people may own pets. Are you allowing pets?
Yes.
And so you'll have availability of dog walk areas?
We will do a dog walk area, and we typically provide a dog wash station as well.
Okay. And then I started thinking about the recycling on site. I know that you have trash facilities, and these people are renting, so they don't have the wherewithal to take anything that's recyclable to the Martin Street facility here in Longmont. And in Longmont, we're making huge pushes for recycling and even composting. Now, I'm not sure I would expect apartments to do composting. However, is it possible that you can work into some of these kinds of things on your grounds so that we can, there's a lot of people here.
Right.
A lot of trash, a lot of recycling, starting from go as part of their, I don't know how you do it, lease agreement or something that they would be required, or you'd make a facility so that they can do that. I'm concerned that we carry on throughout the city, because one of your statements was something about keeping up with the environmental concerns, and this is one of Longmont's.
As we encourage that, and we try and make it easy for the folks to be able to recycle. So in our trash areas throughout the community, we have bins for regular trash and for recycle, and separate pickups for each.
Okay, and I'm thinking in terms of everybody ordering from Amazon, will there be provision for large and small cardboard boxes even to be recycled.
We will, we'll talk through that and figure out how we, whether we have somebody to break down the boxes. But that's something on the management side that we do. So we'll be able to identify that if it becomes a problem and manage it.
I appreciate that. Like I say, we're very much looking at Longmont as being sustainable. And the last question I have is in regards to your right out intersection there at Ken Pratt and Great Western Drive. And I don't know if you want to answer that or if I need to talk to traffic engineering.
Well, ask your question and we'll see who's better suited to answer it.
Well, I have safety concerns because I have noted in the past watching people with large vehicles drive right over and make that left turn anyway, or go across an intersection. And how comfortable are you with that at your development?
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but there's an opportunity on 119th to make that left turn much safer. So I would hope that people would choose that option because it's not out of the way by any means. So if you want a more technical answer than that,
Yes.
I can ask our traffic engineer to maybe add to that, add a little more color.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Plank, 4582 South Ulster Street, Denver, Colorado, 80237, and I helped prepare the traffic study for this. And so this is an existing intersection right here. The project will be tying in with an access on the north leg there with 3/4 movements actually, so you'll have the eastbound left into the project there, and they'll operate from the traffic study report as level service C, which is an acceptable operations. Movement level service can be acceptable up to level service E. So 2 more categories for the threshold to be acceptable there.
Okay. And I guess my next questions are to traffic engineering.
All right.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there somebody from traffic?
Good evening, Commission. Chris Huffer with Public Works and Natural Resources. Did you have a question?
I do, Chris. Looking at this schematic, it's not showing me what I'm trying to find out. Because I have seen traffic at Great Western come out and turn left onto 119 and go ahead south and west. There's the small roads in that area, I think. My concern is that how will you prevent people from being able to get around, say, an island? Is there an island in the middle of the road there that's going to prevent that?
So yes, there is an island currently there that creates that 3/4 movement that was just spoken about for eastbound to turn left or north into this property. So there are islands there in the middle. And then also with the development of farmhouse just to the south and east of this property, there were some improvements done to those existing islands that are on the south side, and that is a right-in, intended to be a right-in, right-out. So they are constructed to highway standards. Of course, we can always build something, but we can't always make people do the right thing, so.
Okay, so, but you're satisfied that it's adequately constructed?
Yes, yeah, it is constructed to current standards for the highway.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Commissioner Teta?
Thank you, Chair Poland. Chris, while you're still here, I have a question for you about the proposed signalized intersection there at 119 and Ken Pratt. That'll be concurrent with this project or prior?
Staff is looking at that. I don't know the final decision has been made at this point, but most likely, there's other things happening in this area. When the signal meets warrants, that's when the signal will be constructed. I think that, and maybe their traffic engineer can answer better than I can. I'm not sure that this project in and of itself meets the warrants at that location, but it would be our intention to construct it shortly thereafter or with this, concurrent with this project.
And there was a second signalized intersection there at, I think, Third and Alpine mentioned in the,
That is under consideration for future signalization as well, depending on background traffic. And again, I don't recall from the traffic impact study, but I don't believe that this particular project with its traffic generation met the warrant for Alpine and Third as well.
Thank you.
But it is on the city CIP project list, and it's under consideration by the city.
thanks, Chris. I had a question for the applicant as well. The, one of the buildings is going to have live work as part of it. Can you expand on that a little bit? Tell us what it's going to be like. We don't have much of that in this city, so I'm fascinated with that.
We don't have a design for the floor plan yet, but effectively what they are is the ground level is can operate as a small business, maybe an office at the ground level, and then the upper area is the living area.
And is that a definite component of, I mean, for sure you're going to have that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Lukacs?
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to the intersection of Kent Pratt and 119th Street. Again, regarding the signalized intersection. It looks like in your recommendations, you also looked at the MUTCD recommendations and look at the crashes that happened there. So are you recommending a signalized intersection there or not? It just wasn't clear for me. If someone can expand on that.
I can cover both of the warrants. Ken Pratt and 119th Street does not meet vehicle volume warrants. That would have to meet the warrants when development to the south is developed in the future, and that would be determined in a future traffic study. The city did direct us to look at the crash experience warrants. There were 5 crashes in the period of 1 year, so that does meet a candidate for consideration of signal, and so the city is determining that right now.
And have you looked, I know you counted current pedestrian and bicycle traffic. Have you thought with so many units, how many pedestrians and bicycles are going to cross the highway or want to cross the highway safely?
If a signal was implemented in the future, there'd be crosswalks for that, but no, the pedestrian and bicycle crossing was not incorporated in the traffic study, and that's fairly typical for the traffic study.
Yeah, I know it is typical. It's just you have a trail right there across the street and a trailhead. So I assume a lot of people that are going to move there are going to take that in consideration when they look for a place to stay. And it's, you know, a marketing opportunity. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Height?
Thank you. Mr. French, I guess I'll start with you. I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'll go to you first. So Longmont has an awful lot of apartments, at least in my opinion, or in my observations, particularly recently. Just to the south of you, I think, you know, another 400 to 500 units, maybe I'm a little high, another 300 units at least, has gone in just to the south, a little bit east of that, is a major development. On the other side of County Road 1 is another project coming in. You're planning to put in another 350 units of apartments. Why?
The number's actually 330.
Okay.
So it's a little lower.
Thanks.
We believe there's a demand here. We believe there's a desire for people who want to live here in Longmont. You've got some new businesses along the corridor that are here and more potentially coming. So we think it's a great opportunity to be a part of the community and provide some quality housing.
And what about a different mix? As opposed to apartments, some ownership-based multifamily types of products, maybe condominiums, maybe paired homes. Just north behind that country club, there's a mix of housing types going in. Have you thought about that?
We have not. I think it's always good for a community to have a good mix of different product types for sale and rentals. Our business is apartments, and so that's what we've looked at for this particular site.
Okay. Thanks. I don't know how to press you further on that. But Planner Hewitt Apperson, you're next.
Sure.
You referenced, I think it's in page 9, but you also, in your presentation, identified this project as being part of, I think it was, you called it the Sugar Factory Planning Sub-Area.
Correct.
I thought it was the Sugar Mill Factory, but it's whatever it's called. I've not been able to identify that. I know that other planners have presented to us periodically over the last, I think, 2 years, the ULI report, and then there was a reference to a new study late last year by Suntech. And in those studies, and as you referenced, there's a sub-plan, but I don't find a sub-plan anywhere in our zoning code. Is there such a thing? Am I missing it?
It's a work in progress
Okay.
currently.
I did look at the zoning map because that's what I want to do. Do you have that handy? Can you pull that up for everyone to take a look
see.
at?
Okay, doesn't want to go right to, there we go. So this is the zoning map.
Yeah, there we go. It's different than the official zoning map, but I think it is a fair representation of what we have going on. 125-ish acres is what that triangle represents. In the zoning map, the MUE, the multi-use employment, is east of, I don't know what that main road is, Sugar Mill Road, north-south?
119th Street.
119th as it continues on.
Right,
Sorry,
it's
thank you.
north, basically it's north of Sugar Mill Road and then that southern section.
Okay.
There's a very large, that large white area is currently unincorporated,
That
Boulder
was
County.
my next question. That's
So-
unincorporated. That's not part of the city at all, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And it is it is designated for mixed-use employment on the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan
But
future
it
land
has
use
no
map.
zoning characteristics right now. It's designated as such in the,
It
in
is,
Envision. Okay.
if memory serves me correct, general industrial and unincorporated Boulder County.
okay. Because in the sub-area work in progress plans, as I understand them, land use issues, design issues, and somewhat importantly, remediation issues associated with the old sugar mill are identified as key components. How does this plan, this project, mesh into that work in progress? It seems like it's a big work in progress, and then we have a new concrete plan coming in.
Sure. So in terms of the environmental components, there has been a environmental assessment as well as a species and habitat plan prepared as part of this project. It was included with the packet.
I saw a phase 2 that said there were no agricultural chemicals, but I didn't see the phase 1.
The phase 1 would basically assess whether or not there were uses that warranted going deeper into
Okay.
a phase 2.
I appreciate that for the site-specific project.
Sure.
But it's next door to an asbestos-laden plant. At least that's what I understood. You know, the county posted it, don't come in asbestos. Asbestos moves, asbestos is friable, asbestos is an air hazard. Is there, Mr. Baird, you might have to come back and answer some questions too. Are there any issues associated with putting in residential in an area that, I don't know if it has or hasn't been remediated for asbestos?
To my knowledge, it's not something that, we have to take into consideration the existing property, in terms of environmental issues. We can't, aren't able to really consider adjacent properties. The existing, the environmental assessment for this particular property, and I don't know if, I'm gonna let the development team speak to that, a little better, because they are gonna be a little
Okay.
more competent in that than I am.
But what I'm hammering you on, and hammer is a strong word, in the city's review of this sub-area, in its planning, and its, looking at remediation issues, has it thought about how you would start doing residential development in the midst of possibly doing remediation? I mean, is there a thought about that? From the city's perspective?
I'm gonna defer to Glenn. He's been more involved in that planning process than I have.
I adopted that process, actually from Aaron. But for the on-site, yes, that's, in fact, that's why it's taken so long, is trying to come up with a finance plan that would at least clean the site on the sugar mill itself. But, so that is a big part of and we call it Sugar Factory because technically, historically, it's really a factory and not a mill. So we were corrected at some point through the process. But it's a very big part of, we're into kind of the implementation plan, so it's a very big part of the implementation plan.
Okay. Mr. Baird, do you have anything more to add regarding the owner's remediation plans, if any, that you can talk about?
Nothing that I would have.
Thank you.
Details on.
Okay. Ms. Hewitt Apperson. So this all dovetails into my issue of secondary uses. Secondary uses, not the primary use. When we look at, and I seem to be in the minority, we look at this as a district-wide type of issue. You've kind of narrowed it to a 125 acre parcel as opposed to the whole district, which when I look at the zoning map, the MUR district runs north to Third and over to darn near Second. Well, not Second, Main almost. But Weaver Park, Rogers Road, Primrose, the car dealerships, et cetera, back in there, as part of MUR and somewhat contiguous to this property.
Correct.
But if we look at the 125 acre sugar factory sub-area, half of it isn't zoned at all because it's in unincorporated Boulder County, but it's designated for MUR, I guess. Maybe from that. But you identified that this 28 acre parcel, 23 acre parcel represents 19% of the entire 125 acre sugar factory sub-area. And it's all going to be residential. Not all of the sub-area is going to be residential. There's no residential component. So do you foresee a problem? This is a great, I guess, anchor or a start to redevelop that area, adding residential, but I think it limits potential future residential use or MUR potential to only, which is to encourage residential as a secondary use with an employment emphasis. If all of the residential is going to be in this particular parcel, do we limit the opportunities for future owners to do good things in an MUR capacity? Because the residential is taken up by this particular project, which is all residential.
So, just for clarification, there is a commercial component to this project. There is a, taking out the rights of way, outlots, et cetera. 20%, there are 5 parcels proposed. One of those is commercial. And then there is also the live work component proposed. In terms of whether this takes up all of the secondary use potential, we really are looking at less than 50%, and this is far less than 50% of this entire area. So, at this point, we have to consider projects as they come in. And, it's very difficult for us to be able to say, well, no, you can't do this because someone else might come in later and want to do the same thing. That's something we're not in a great position to do. Glenn, would you like to add anything on that?
No, I think that's exactly it, and I think when you have an area like this.
Your mic's not on.
When you have an area like this that is not annexed, we go back to the comp plan and look at what's recommended, and I believe this whole area is MUE, right?
Correct. This is all mixed-use employment.
I might just say R, I apologize, but.
That's okay. I knew what you meant.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you both.
I do have a follow-up in regards to that. Can you go to the applicant's page, screen number 3, I believe? Because I think this will help. I have the same question concerning what this does for future.
Is this the one you were referring to?
Yes, because on any of those 3, there's a second residential component, kind of in the middle. And I'm wondering, have we looked at, when we add those 2 residential components together, where are we at percentage-wise?
Well, I don't think we have done, this was, kind of a quick charrette.
Yeah,
type
but
plan. I
this
don't
is
know if
getting
we-
to Commissioner
And
Height's question is, will this be able to be done, something like this?
So one thing I will point out is the MUE area does basically go up to roughly 3rd Street. So this sugar factory planning area is not the entire MUE area. So there is quite a bit more MUE in this immediate vicinity.
Okay, thank you. Our Vice Chair Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. Hi.
Hi.
Let me ask you just a couple quick questions,
Sure.
and then maybe I'll have 1 or 2 for the applicant. I'm going to ask him the same question, but when we were planning this project, did we take into consideration the functioning railroad line to the north, and was that kind of in the discussions and understood, or was there some silent hope that isn't railroad going away or something like that? Was it top of mind?
So it's important to note, this is a very preliminary part of the process. As it moves, assuming if this commission chooses to advance this project forward, any mitigation efforts that would need to be taken or need to be considered, those would be evaluated, as far as the acoustic analysis would be evaluated. We would not assume that any of the existing uses would go away. We do have buffer requirements as well. So we would have to, as this moves forward through the site planning process, we would be looking at those standards, looking at how they would, do their noise mitigation, et cetera. But yeah, no, we aren't assuming that the railroad is just going to go away.
Okay, great.
So, this is a mixed-use employment area. This is a functioning, some parts of it are currently vacant and not in use, but there are functioning businesses and industrial type uses in this area. And that's something that definitely is a consideration moving forward.
Great, thank you. During the applicant's presentation, they talked about the bike path running along 119 as being part of a missing link, I think, to provide connectivity on this side of town. Did your team evaluate that from the perspective of helping connect the bike path on the east side of town? And is it helping connect, and how?
So the Development Review Committee does include representatives from Parks and Recreation, Transportation, et cetera. So those are, issues that weren't, we would be, that is something that's contemplated for sure, and we'd be working with the applicant moving forward to do that.
Okay, I think the rest of my questions will be for Mr. Finch.
Commissioners, if you don't mind, my name's Lee Busey, and I'm with Fairfield Residential. I'm going to give Mr. Finch a little break here.
Oh, sure. Mr. Busey.
And I'm at 1644 Platt Street as well, Denver.
Thank you, thank you. I'm asking you the same question. Were you guys thinking about the railroad and the kind of existing infrastructure or existing structures and businesses when you were building this project, or when you were planning this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So this isn't new to us. I mean, we've done this before. I mean, when you brought that question up, the first thing that came to mind is we built the project down on US 36 in Westminster, over kind of by, if you know where the Westminster Promenade is, and there's a rail line that runs right next, functioning rail line.
Great.
And what we do is we're just very design focused. So in that project, we actually, the city asked that we put up a wall. So we put up a brick wall there. And then we do, as Sean mentioned, Sean Finch, we do an acoustical study. We do it during the day. And we'll get an STC, it's like a rating, and it'll tell us what sort of building materials, what sort of windows we need to use, and we'll do that. And what's interesting is we found a lot of times, railroads make a lot of noise, but believe it or not, freeways make more noise, and a lot of our projects are by freeways, so we are used to this.
Okay, thank you. The city has a requirement for inclusionary zoning / housing or contributing a fee in lieu. Can you clarify your position on that and just kind of the why?
Sure. So this is an interesting one. This may get us all thinking a little bit here. So if can you flip, Jennifer, to our, oh, I guess it's me, sorry. I apologize there. Whoop, wrong way. I'm going to use this one as, so, one thing we haven't talked a lot about is the history of this project. So, we've been working with city staff. We've been working with Tony Chacon in the Economic Development Department since 2020. And the way that we got involved in this project is because during the pandemic, this property was under contract to a big logistics company that if I said the name, everybody would know. And they decided that it wasn't in their plans anymore. And we had an opportunity to step in and talk to the landowner, put the piece of property under contract. So, I think it's important to understand that, for one. And as soon as we did that, the first thing we did was we reached out to the city. We reached out to staff and said, we're a residential developer, owner, operator, and we're interested in putting apartments here. And we want to learn a little bit more about this mixed-use employment zoning and what it actually means. And this site plan, just so everybody's clear, is a function of several meetings with the city where we laid out percentages of commercial versus residential. So it wasn't just something that we laid onto the city. It was multiple rounds. But during that process, we had tossed around the idea of actually taking the 3-acre commercial piece and considering putting an affordable housing project there. At the time that we had those conversations with staff, we were told that there was a considerable amount of affordable housing that was planned across from us to the west or was in the works, and that is probably not a good idea. So think about just paying the cash in lieu. And that's where we are today, is we've proposed to pay the cash in lieu at the direction of what we heard.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, one of the other requirements or recommendations from the staff was that you kind of identify the need to continue to work with Excel and continue to navigate the waters around utility access. Is your team prepared to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've already engaged in conversations. We've had a couple staff meetings with Excel and Longmont Power to talk about how we're going to just kind of plan logistically all the utilities. So that is in the works.
Great. Those are all my questions.
Okay.
I need to apologize to my peers up here because those are some like softball questions. The reality is, you know, this seems like a really good project for the location in our town, and I have very few problems with it. You know, it's nice to have a project come before us that doesn't require a variance, and those can be challenging to get through. We haven't seen a whole lot of development in that part of town, and specifically on that property. You know, I've lived in Longmont for a long time, and the sugar factory is certainly an impressive, beautiful, you know, like landscape and icon for our town, but there just hasn't been any development around there. There's been so many challenges that Commissioner Height brought up. But it's really exciting to see development coming into kind of the gateway to our town. Additionally, it's the kind of development that we need. You know, all you got to do is read the paper every few weeks and you'll find out that we don't have enough housing. We don't have enough housing. I can't remember ever seeing something that's saying that we have too much inventory, right? So yes, we do have a lot of apartments going up and we do have a lot of developments going in, but I think that's what's going to continue to let the folks that work here, live here, and, you know, the folks that want to, you know, our workforce teams, workforce staff will have a place to live, and I think that will continue to make Longmont accessible because those property values are going up and up and up, and it's making it impossible to live here. So I think it's really desirable, and I know that we have to stick to a particular percentage and when it's a secondary use and the, you know, mixed use employment area, it can't exceed X percentage. But I think that calculation is important to have, but without looking at it, without like doing too much math, I go, well, this makes sense. It's what our town needs. It's what we're going to continue to need, and it's in a good side of town. There's the rest of the property to the west where we have other neat opportunities for, you know, whatever the rest of the kind of areas we're calling out, additional residential or commercial or other mixed uses. So in the end, I just don't have too many concerns with it, and I'm largely favorable of it. Maybe a real quick question, when it comes to, in our packet, kind of on the first report, it showed the staff recommendation. It's a little bit of just, when it said our options, it says 1, approve, 2, deny, or 3, approve with conditions. Historically, we have option 1 is to approve, option 2 is to approve with conditions, and then the denial is the third option. When I pulled up our actual resolutions, it reflected that. So I just want to make sure that whatever motion I'm about to make is, you know, received accurately. So, you know, I'm going to put out a motion out there and look forward to hearing from the rest of the commission, any feedback there. But because it meets all the review criteria, which are shared in the staff packet, because there's no need for variances, because there's no pushback from neighbors, because the applicant recognizes that there's a fully functioning, you know, factory just to the north that requires a rail line, I get it, and they get it. Because they're willing to meet all the recommendations that the city has provided as recommendations for conditions, I don't really see any reason not to move forward with this project. So my recommendation or my motion would be to motion to approve PZR 2022-11, I think I'm going to call it B. 11B, which requires the following conditions. Well, they're the 3 listed in our packet. The applicant has selected the fee in lieu option for inclusionary housing ordinance, and we'll add that during the final plat and site plan review process. Fire reserves the right for future comments should any changes to the submittal affect emergency services, and additional information, calculations, plans, and analysis will be required at the final plat and site plan review stage to show all of these things have been met.
Okay, let's go ahead and move to Commissioner Lukash.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions for staff, and I'll start with a soft one. There was a public comment there, and it was talking about water, that the Colorado River is low, and we know that's to the west.
Pardon me. I guess, Eugene, do we need to have a second on the motion before we continue discussion? That would be better procedure. Okay.
Oh.
Were you gonna second, or did you have questions?
I was gonna do both.
Okay, I'll go ahead and Commissioner Kohler?
So I agree with Commissioner Goldberg. I think this is a easy project. I think I do have a couple of questions. So I'll second the motion, but.
And I'll put you back in the queue.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Now for additional comments. Commissioner Lukash.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding the water, we know Colorado River is to the west. What about the east? Are we having a problem regarding water and access to water? I assume it's about potable water. Are we looking at our water reserve when we're looking at new developments? And specifically, this is 330 units, so it's significant.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Huffer.
Okay.
Commission, yes, the city is constantly and continuously looking at our water portfolio, working on the water rights that we have, making sure that we have the agricultural rights being adjudicated into municipal use. So it's a constant and continuous process. We do have the raw water policy that goes along with the city's annexation procedures. So when a property's annexed, they have to turn over historic raw water. And then for development, we require that the property have a minimum of 3 acre-feet per acre of supply. Part of that is storage and part of that is surface water. Once it's annexed, if the historic raw water does not yield 3 acre-feet per acre, they have a deficit, and at the time of plat, that deficit has to be made up. And that can either be by cash in lieu, which then the city can go out and purchase additional raw water or CBT, or the developer has the option to purchase a handful of different ditch rights or shares that they can turn over to the city. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure someone is looking at that and what was the process. So I think you answered that.
Okay.
Since you're up there, my other question was just going back to that intersection of Ken Pratt and 119th.
Yes.
And you mentioned that being looked at, it's part of a consideration, and obviously it's a highway, so CDOT is involved, I'm sure. What can we do to make that happen? Can we do something to make that happen?
Yes, I will say that, I think I mentioned that there are other things at play in this area. That there is a open mine permit on what we call the Erwin Thomas project that is to the south of this area here. And in working through that plan for them to mine, this would be one route for trucks, and that trucking would push everything over a warrant to install the light there. I think that we're very close. I think, as was mentioned earlier, that the crash data is getting to that point that it can be considered. So as we go through plat and as we put together the public improvement plans for this project, we'll have to make a determination on if that light needs to go in now or if it needs to wait. It feels like that it's getting pushed towards sooner rather than later, I guess I'd say. I'd also say that being that it's on the highway, and Highway 119, or 119th Street, I believe, is a collector street, that makes it eligible for our TCIF funding as well. So it wouldn't be the developer all constructing that signal when it comes in.
Okay, so that was another question. So it's more the city building that and with CDOT, not the developer?
I think the developer would have some participation in that, but we do have other funds to cover it as well.
Okay. Just because I'm looking, we've been hearing that it's connecting missing links and trails, and some safe crossing there would definitely connect things and connecting people and trails and mobility.
It is definitely a link that is needed just because of the trails to the south, and that would be a great at-grade crossing. It'd be able to get people south on 119th Street to the trailhead there.
Okay, thank you for your explanation.
Yep.
Commissioner Kohler?
So yeah, as I was saying, I think this is a good project. I think it's refreshing not to have a variance to make our lives kind of easier here. But I do have just a couple of questions, and I will actually first second what Commissioner LaCoche said. To me, this kind of seems like an island of people, actually, without that way to cross Ken Pratt. I think the only other way they could get across would be to go up further east and cross at Third, but I don't know that there's a connection even between this a sidewalk and up to Third. So I really feel it needs that extra piece in order to make it safe for pedestrians. But I had a couple questions on the environmental study. I think that might be best answered by the applicant.
Happy to.
So I noticed there's an existing red-tailed hawk nest there now, and that your construction might overlap with the nesting period. So I'm just curious, if the hawk were to show up the season prior to or during your construction, what would you do? It seems like a project too big to just postpone on behalf of a hawk. What action would you guys take?
Yeah, so we've, one of our consultants, CTL, is heavily engaged in that. I don't know if we can go so far at this point in actually saying our schedule and when that overlapping, if it overlaps or not. I don't think we're there yet to say if that's the case. There is a protocol, which you'll have to forgive me, I don't have it memorized, that there's a nesting season. And I know we have to make sure that we go out and do surveys to confirm that there isn't nesting or any red-tailed hawks before we start construction, and we're planning to adhere to that policy.
And I guess that's my question. So you go and do the surveys and the nest is there. I mean, are you willing to delay construction? Is that?
So we've asked the question. So I think our first step before we go so far is just say we're going to stop construction. I think we were told when we talked to staff, we actually talked with, I'll forget the gentleman, but Zach last week. Thank you for that. And Zach said if a nest were discovered, our next step would be to contact Colorado Fish and Wildlife and have them come and make an observation and a recommendation on what needs to happen. So that would be our next step.
Okay. I would just, I guess, personally advocate, because this area is being developed and the birds obviously have less and less places to go, and they, seems like they have nested there for multiple years now. It might be possible that if the nest were to show up, you wouldn't have to cut the tree down necessarily. Once the construction was built, the bird might come back and then not be impacted at all.
Well, and one thing to keep in mind here is the trees that you'll see if you drive by the property, they're actually not on the property. They're on the adjacent property. So I think when it's being evaluated, the evaluation is really whether construction will interfere with them being in proximity to the site.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. And then you have prairie dogs, so I assume you're going through the city of Longmont process for removal of those?
We are. So met with Zach. He walked us through the entire process. Again, I mean, we have a lot of steps ahead of us still. We have to go through a site plan process. We have to go through our whole building permit process. So, we'll definitely stay up to speed on that. And when the time is right, follow the protocol.
Okay, great, thanks. And then I had one follow-up question for staff, actually. One of the members of the public mentioned all the grass, and looking at this drawing, I would
Sure.
agree with that. What options does the applicant have to do something more like the hospital did and not have the lawns necessarily in
Sure,
this
so
space?
it's important to note this is a conceptual plan. So the areas in green are fairly generically shown as landscaping. So as we move forward with the site plan process, and Leanne can actually discuss the actual, what they're looking at in more detail. But as we move forward, we do have requirements as far as trees and shrubs and such, and, you know, encouraging water-wise landscaping, et cetera. So I'll let Leanne talk a little more about that.
Yes, water is a concern for all of us, and we're all in this together. So we don't plan to turf that entire area. So again, thank you. It's definitely a representation of landscaped area. A lot of what you see along Ken Pratt Boulevard is actually CDOT right away. So that, other than seeding any disturbed area, we don't have control over a lot of that once construction's complete. We'll utilize a lot of native seed and low water planting beds. We'll use turf and more high water demand in just the pocket park area, where we will have you know, kids playing, that sort of thing, where it's appropriate. In the heart of the community, there will be right now it's more green, but that's planned to be some community garden spaces, plazas, some pavers. So all of what is green right now will certainly not be turf. So.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just quickly give my thoughts. I am in favor of this. This is just the preliminary plat. There's still some details to be fleshed out, but it is the first piece of the puzzle for this piece of property that the city is looking to develop. I think it's thought out. I look forward to what we do with the rest of it, but as far as the first piece, I think it's a good beginning, and I'll be for this project. Is there any other comments, thoughts, questions? If not, Jane, I think we are ready for a vote.
Commissioner Height?
Nope.
Commissioner Teta?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Goldberg?
Yes.
Chairman Poland?
Yes.
Commissioner Flake?
Yes.
Commissioner Lukacs?
Yes.
Commissioner Kohler?
Yes.
Chairman, that passes 6-1 with Commissioner Height dissenting.
Thank you very much. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, November 17th at 8 a.m. and it ends Wednesday, November 23rd at 5 p.m. That takes us, that is our item for the public hearing. We now are into other business. Are we okay to keep moving forward, Commission? Okay. Items from the Commission. So I
Mr. Chair,
guess.
I think you have a final call.
Oh, sorry, final call, sorry. You are right, final call, public invited to be heard. Jane, do we have anybody on the sheet? No, we do not have any. Is anybody left in the audience who would like to come and speak for final public invited to be heard? If not, we'll go ahead and close final invited to be heard. And now we will move to items from the commission. So as Glenn said, I had a chance with Commissioner Teta and with Planning Director Glenn Van den Wiggen to interview. We had 7 candidates. We have 2 open seats that will be coming open next year. We have the 3 alternate positions that will also need to be filled. And do you mind if I talk?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Chris and I were very impressed by the candidates. We kind of broke this into 3 parts, I would say. The first part is coming down to picking 5 people out of the 7 who we'd like to move on through. And it became clear to us that we did have a preference for 5 people. I will say that the people who did interview was Jerry Boone, Selena Kohler, Anna Lukash, Kay Marsh, Joshua Palmer, Matthew Popkin, and Amy Saunders. Out of those, who we chose to move forward was Jerry Boone, Selena Kohler, Anna Lukash, Matthew Popkin, and Amy Saunders. We felt that the current members and current alternates are doing a good job, and that we would like to keep them on the commission. The next part was probably the harder part, which is deciding which two we would recommend to be the permanent members on the commission. We started with Commissioner Lukash, who has been on the commission for 1 year. We feel that she's done a really good job, and we would recommend that she be one of the two positions. The other one, what we've decided is that we would recommend that Amy Saunders be recommended for the position, which would mean that Jerry Boone, Selena Kohler, and Matthew Popkin would be recommended as alternate positions. At this time, I will move it to the commission if there's any questions, any discussion on that. Vice Chair Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. Admittedly, this is a little bit of an unusual process, I gotta tell you. This feels weird to be having this discussion in this format with applicants here. I don't think this is a good way to do this. Are we making the decision today, or is this something that we will, are we making a recommendation today to City Council?
Who may then re-interview everyone.
Cool. Okay, so from, Chairman, you had me, well, this is hard because none of us sat in the interviews or anything like that. So I gotta tell you,
I will say this.
I'm definitely favorable to the recommendation to bring on Commissioner Lukash full-time. Boy, I would make a recommendation to bring on Commissioner Kohler full-time too, given her tenure with the commission as well. If you want to have this conversation publicly right now, that's fine, but I'll lean on you.
Please.
Yes. Commissioner Kohler. Oh, wait, there you go.
So I appreciate that, I really do. And perhaps it would help in your, to know that I volunteered to be an alternate. I would love to be a full-time commissioner, but I have no concerns about being an alternate. I do this strictly in a volunteer capacity, so I offered my services in any way the commission felt was best. So thank you for that, though, I appreciate it.
Okay, I think you're back on.
Okay.
Well, he's finished.
Oh, sorry. Forgive me. Man, if she is interested in being a full-time member of our commission, I find, again, I'm challenged with why we would pass. Could I please defer to you and to Chairman and Commissioner Teta to expand on why we should select, I think it is candidate Saunders, maybe? Thank you.
Okay, well, a question was asked, so.
It can be an open discussion. I think we're in like the informal.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to Commissioner Flake.
I have the same sentiments as Commissioner Goldberg does. And I reference the fact that Commissioner Kohler brings with her incredible strength in the environmental areas that the rest of us, I don't think, have. And she has it at a touch.
Commissioner Teta.
Commissioner Flake and fellow commissioners and chair, I think we all, those of us involved in the interview process anyway, concur and completely agree, especially based on tenure and also all that Commissioner Kohler brings with regard to her environmental background and experience. But she also went way out of her way to impress upon us her willingness to continue to be an alternate. No one else did that. seven very qualified candidates for 5 positions and trying to juggle who gets what, made it very difficult. Yeah.
Which I will add, which is why, I mean, this is the second part of it. That was the first part of it. The second part is for us to have a discussion as a commission to finalize a recommendation. So, and I will agree with Commissioner Teta. It was not an easy decision. I mean, am I hard fast with the decision? No, but I mean, what me and Commissioner Teta wanted to do is make sure that as a commission, we came up with a solid recommendation to the city council of who we feel, so that it is not left into the city, it's in their hands, but we're providing a solid recommendation. And that's why we felt we had to nominate somebody. And that's what it was. So Commissioner, or Vice Chair Goldberg.
Yeah, so then, thank you, and thank you for your guys' time with the interview process. What I'm hearing is that this wasn't a decision based on merit. Perhaps Commissioner Kohler was more effusive than she's being at the moment about her desire to be an alternate. I'd be so brazen to make a recommendation that we make the recommendation of Commissioner Kohler and Commissioner Lukacs as our permanent seats if they're agreeable to those. Without any judgment, but if they're agreeable, I think that would be my first recommendation.
Commissioner Height.
Thank you. I agree too, from a pure utilitarian standpoint. I believe Commissioner Saunders is new and shows eagerness and potential, but Commissioner Kohler has been fantastic for many years and is invaluable, and we'd be silly not to have her. Silly. It would be a mistake not to accept her as a full member.
Are there any other comments? Oh, Commissioner Teta.
And I'm perfectly fine with that. Yeah.
As I am as well. Commissioner Vice Chair Goldberg.
Commissioner Kohler, are you willing to be a full-time member of the Planning and Zoning Commission?
I am, thank you. I didn't mean for this to be put me on the spot. Maybe I shouldn't have been the alternate today.
I'm glad you're here.
It's a lot of pressure on you guys.
Okay, so I guess there will be 5 of us voting on this. Then I will go ahead and, we have the 5 who are not. I'll go ahead and put forth a motion that Commissioner Lukacs. Oh, yeah, sure.
I guess I would actually ask, are we sure that that the other applicants are willing to be the alternate?
We
Are
are
you
not.
going to end up in a position where you don't have an alternate?
I will pass that over to Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen. What happens if they turn down a chance or the opportunity or the recommendation to be an alternate?
Right. So a part of the application, the written application, is are you willing to be an alternate? And I believe all our candidates said yes. So they can always withdraw, I guess, from the process.
Okay.
All right, just to clarify that, and, if something happens and you don't have an alternate, I'm obviously still willing to do that.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and make a motion that we recommend to City Council that Commissioner Lukacs and Commissioner Kohler be the 2 recommendations for the 2 permanent seats, and that Commissioners Boone, Commissioner Saunders, and Matthew Popkin are recommended for the 3 alternate positions.
I will second.
Okay, we have a second. We have a motion. We have a second. Any other discussion? If not, Jane, I think we are ready for a vote.
Commissioner Height?
Aye.
Commissioner Tetta?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Goldberg?
Yes.
Chairman Poland?
Aye.
Commissioner Flagg?
Yes.
Chairman, that passes 5-0.
Very good, thank you very much. So that item is done. I just want to take the time and I want to thank, even though they are not here, I want to thank the public who came out today and spoke at Public Invited to be Heard at the beginning of the meeting. It's actually refreshing to see and get participation from the public and hear their opinions on items that affect them and that may or may not be coming in front of us. But I do applaud them for coming out and giving us their thoughts on a subject. So I just want to make sure that if they are listening at this point, that we have heard them, and we appreciate them coming out. Is there any other items from the commission? Seeing none and seeing, Commissioner, or Vice Chairman Goldberg.
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize to the commission. I threw my motion out on today's agenda item real early, and I didn't mean to end the discussion or cut off questions, and I apologize. That was bad form.
Okay, we do not have with us Council Member Rodriguez, and so now items from Planning Director Glenn Van Nimwegen.
I do want to talk about your schedule in December. We do have an application that'll come before you. The regular date that we set way back at the beginning of the year is December 21st. It's getting kind of close to Christmas. We could certainly do the 14th, and we're hoping maybe that fits better into all your schedules.
Vice Chair Goldberg.
Yeah, that's better for me. I don't know about the rest of the commission.
Commissioner Flagg.
It doesn't matter to me. Either one is fine.
Commissioner Tetta.
It doesn't matter to me either.
Commissioner Lukash.
I'm available for either, I would prefer the 21st, actually, just because I have a surgery and I will maybe recovering on the 14th still. But most likely I will still wiggle my way in here.
Commissioner Height. I think for me, while I'm available on both, I think I would prefer the 14th just to give a little bit of cushion going into Christmas. So I think the consensus is the 14th.
Great. Okay. All right, other than that, I just want to give you an update on some of the things that are proceeding through City Council. I might have told you a little bit about the Main Street Corridor Plan and the recommendations to implement it through some parking changes and through some allowed uses changes. Last night at City Council, they approved on second reading the amendment to the parking code that basically says residential can now be a maximum number as far as number of spaces. So I think that's a little bit of groundbreaking change to the code. Now, we took an incremental step, so that only affects the mixed-use downtown and mixed-use corridor districts. So it's still, in the rest of the community, it's still a minimum parking standard for residential uses, but who knows, maybe we'll see further changes as hopefully this is successful and helps us implement some of the goals of the Main Street Corridor Plan, which was trying to create a more active, economically viable, and pedestrian-oriented area. So then the other part is land uses, where we're going to put recommending conditional uses on future auto-related uses, uses that have high turnover as far as for automobiles, drive-throughs. That went through first reading last night, and we'll come back in December for a second reading on that as well. So we're finally getting to the point of implementing that plan that I think was adopted in 2018. I don't remember exactly what that date was, but just to let you know about that. Also, from a transportation planning standpoint, the Transportation Division is going to move forward with a master plan for transportation. They are incorporating Vision Zero, which is a concept of reducing to zero deaths on our roadways, whether it's pedestrians, bicycles, drivers. So Phil did a really great presentation on how his intent is really to flip the normal transportation planning process where you look at how do we move vehicles safely to how we move pedestrians safely. So I think it's going to be a very great process, and hopefully some of you can be involved in that as well. But yes, sir.
Can we try to address secondary uses on a district-wide versus project-specific basis? I still have trouble working with a district-wide standard when the district throughout the city is disparate, jumps around, and if you read the language specifically, it just says the district. That's 20 different places around the city. As opposed to whether or not that should apply on a per project basis. If that could get clarified, that would help my agita a bit.
We did have a study session on this. I think it was last, right at the new year, where I think that's all we discussed was secondary, and I thought we kind of hammered out the process, that how we would define the district and that we would stay below 50%. But it is not codified. You're right. Yeah, now one thing we did talk about, we did have on our to-do list amending all of Envision Longmont. That has been put off for a couple of different reasons. However, I think what we will do in next year is bring back the implementation part of the comp plan. And I think that's one thing I talked about is maybe we need to get some more qualitative standards into the primary, secondary. So potentially we could do that through the amendment of that chapter of Envision Longmont. And then we would normally follow it up, with a code amendment.
Hey Glenn, when they brought up the sugar factory area plan,
Yes.
Commissioner Height said like, I can't find it, does it exist? And I feel like I've seen it on this screen, or I received an email about it, or I saw it on that screen one day. There was colors and a vision.
Right.
Did Aaron share that with us?
Yes.
Phil, and then can you re-share that with us?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. So it is a work in progress, and Erin was the project manager with it. And she showed you where we were at that point. It's really kind of interesting in that we started this process primarily, I think, for some things you identified. There's so many barriers and issues with development in this area. We were hoping to spur some action. Well, we have several developers now that are trying to work out plans as we're doing the long-range plan. So one of those developers that actually has the sugar mill went and hired their own planners to look at some different concepts. So at this point, we're trying to work with what's been done by Stantec, but also work in some of the ideas that came out of Charlie Woolley's planners, that is a Studio Urbano, pretty well-known planning firm out of Guatemala. I believe it's out of Guatemala. Pretty unique planning efforts, but trying to incorporate those ideas and still keep it flexible has kind of extended some timeframes for us. And then also tomorrow, we're meeting with the the Public Works and Natural Resources folks that are looking, how do we reconfigure some of the open spaces and wetlands that are on the other side of the railroad tracks. So it's taken longer.
Okay, one follow-up.
Do you want me to put you on?
As it relates to inclusionary zoning and development versus paying fee in lieu, did I say that right?
Yep.
Does the city have a preference? It came across today that as if we may have encouraged that. Does the city have a preference between them developing it or handing, making the fee? I have heard things like the city isn't in the business of building homes, or let's let the developers do that. I've heard kind of both sides. So.
Yeah, and I've heard both sides too. I think some folks believe that if we had that fee in lieu, we have a lot of different options
Sure.
that we can use it for. And then on this site, I think there was a concern with what the city had already in play for, and everybody's kind of competing for 9% low-income housing tax credits.
Sure.
So on this particular site, a year ago, the feeling was maybe it's not the best site. I think that's shifted to a point now where
We'll take what we can get, kind of thing?
staff would like to see
Yeah.
some projects built. And from my standpoint, I'd love to see a developer figure out how to build it within their units. And at this point, the fee in lieu is too easy of an off-ramp, I guess.
I might have guessed. I don't know if it's dollar for dollar in the end. I think about my airline miles. I get, do you buy miles? No, it's not. You don't ever buy the miles. It's kind of nice, but it's not equivalent in value,
Right.
As the cash. So
Yeah.
I just wonder.
And the fee in lieu is really, it's a delta between the units they would have provided, market rate versus what the affordable rate is.
Right.
So it's not like you have to build 3 units, give us the amount of money to build 3 units. It's the delta and the difference in price.
Right.
So,
Do we need to be training our staff to not to sway? Our applicant suggested that he was encouraged, or that was the recommendation from the city. Maybe that's because this discussion was a year ago or 6 months ago, but I just don't know how our positioning gets disseminated, among the team.
right.
Especially if you're saying it has now changed.
Well, it is a different division than planning.
Sure.
But they're directly related to the city manager. You'll also see kind of a movement for affordable and attainable.
Yeah.
With the idea that we have the missing middle problem as well. So we'll probably see some amendments come through with the code that allows some incentive for attainable housing.
Sure.
But to be honest, I'm not
You
really
don't know.
sure what the
I
thinking
mean,
is.
admittedly, this project could have brought what, 30? Is it 10% or so? 30.
It's
30
12%.
12%. And so how
Yeah.
many?
40.
34, 340. So 34, 40 affordable housing units. I don't. That feels like a nice chunk.
Yeah. And Fairfield, and I spoke to them about it, and they do build affordable projects, so they were very interested in that. The other one on this side is, do we give up the commercial for potential more residential? So that was part of it as well.
Glad, did you or Eugene wanted to say anything on the Bond Farm?
Commissioners, Eugene May, City Attorney. So I believe you received a letter on the Bond Farm from Michael Spillman. John. There's been a change of circumstance. Actually, today I was informed by planning staff that there is a complete application for a concept plan amendment where planning and zoning will be the recommending body to city council, who is the decision maker. I consider that to be a quasi-judicial proceeding. I think it's best to have it be quasi-judicial the whole way through P and Z. And so, you know, my recommendation is that the due process protections of a quasi-judicial proceeding are in place now, actually today. It was a much harder question yesterday when we didn't have an application and we were just kind of trying to figure out how to interact and inform the public. And, you know, that's not really the planning and zoning's role. If you look at the functions and duties in the code, you guys act on development applications, you make recommendations about comprehensive plans, those sorts of things. You don't really explain the history of Envision Longmont. I think that that's a staff role. And so in some way, I think the application coming in and being complete today makes it easier for me to sort of advise you that I think you should treat this as a live application. I am going to tell City Council that we have a live application. The Bond Farm community has been very active. I saw them last night at City Council. Many of the same people that were here today, and they're trying to, you know, get their voices heard, which is great. But we have a process to do that, and for here, it will be the concept plan hearing. And, you know, for quasi-judicial, you make the decision on the evidence presented at the hearing. And so we'll work with them to have them understand that process and why we have due process to protect the applicant, as well as to give a forum for the public to be heard in an orderly process. And, you know, I'm encouraged. They were receptive to that. I think Jennifer talked to them early, before the meeting. And I think educating them about the process and showing them where in the process they have an opportunity to be heard. They'll be heard here. They'll be heard at City Council. And that public input will go into the mix for the decision makers and the recommending body. So if you had any other questions, I think that's kind of where I'm at, and we kind of discussed it this afternoon as to what the right process was.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? Okay, then I'll go ahead and move to adjournment.